This
Righty.
conference will now be recorded.
Hi, Steve. Hi, Portuguese. Hi, Renee.
Hey, Joe. We got everybody on. Joe, is Mike on yet?
Mike Walk is not going to be attending tonight.
Okay. All right. So, couple of logistical things. Biggest thing is to keep yourself on mute as much as you can, obviously, unless you are speaking. You can, if you're on a telephone call, you can mute yourself using your phone mute, or you can use *6 to mute and unmute yourself. If you're on the web version, you can kind of should be able to put a cursor over top of your screen, and there'll be a mic button that you can turn green and red. So those are the main things. If we do get feedback, I can mute everybody. Those phone callers will have to unmute themselves with *6 at the time then. Okay. If you would like courtesy of the floor, sounds like we're getting some sounds in the background. If you can mute that.
Steve,
yes.
I'm sorry, real quick. I know there's a way to make everyone be on the screen at the same time without seeing the presentation. Do you know how to do that?
You can view active cameras. So if you go to your cameras, there's a little kind of a drop down. It might say view everyone or view who's talking or hide everyone. If you can change that to active cameras.
I got it. Thank you very much.
You got it, buddy. If you
want to emphasize about the audio a little bit, I think we have quite a bit of feedback.
Yeah, we're getting a little bit of feedback. I'm trying to figure out who it is. I can kind of tell but when it happens, but I will try to figure it out. Courtesy of the floor, if anyone is on the web version, there's a comments feature. You can throw a comment in there if you would like courtesy of the floor, and I'll throw you on a list in the order they come in, and then I'll call you as that goes. If you're on the phone call, that's fine. During courtesy of the floor, we'll open it up for any phone callers also that would like courtesy of the floor. So I think we are good to go. We are recording this. Tori, I think we're ready to roll.
All right. I will now call to order welcome everyone to the April 15th meeting of the South Whitehall Township Board of Commissioners. I'd like to note that all public sessions of the South Whitehall Township Board of Commissioners are electronically recorded. The electronic record is kept until the minutes of the meeting are approved and destroyed if a request is not made to retain the electronic version at that time. What I'd like to do first, if everybody could, you can see behind me, I have our flag. If we could all just quickly do the Pledge of Allegiance to our country. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America, to the republic
Which is
under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Liberty and justice.
Thank you, everybody. I'd like to note we did have an executive session prior to this meeting to discuss some legal matters, and I also wanted to note some additional executive sessions that weren't mentioned at our last meeting. On March 13th, we had an executive session to discuss legal matters, again on March 25th, and as I had previously stated, on April 15th. So with that being said, we're going to move right into our agenda for this evening. And first on our agenda are our minutes for consideration and possible action. We did have some carryover minutes from a previous meeting. The first minutes for consideration are the February 12th, 2020 Land Preservation Board of Commissioner Workshop meeting minutes. The board has gotten copies of these minutes prior. Is there any questions or comments from the board on the February 12th meeting minutes? This is the board, the Land Preservation Board of Commissioner Workshop minutes. Any questions from the board? If there are no questions from the board, do I hear a motion to approve said February 12th Land Preservation BOC Workshop minutes?
so moved.
We have a motion on the floor from Commissioner Mobilio, a second from Commissioner Stetton. We do need a roll call vote, please, Renee.
Commissioner Mobilio.
Aye.
Commissioner Kelly,
Aye.
Commissioner Seton,
Aye.
Commissioner Morgan.
Aye. Motion carries. Thank you, everybody. Next, for consideration this evening, we have our March 4th, 2020 Board of Commissioner regular meeting minutes. They too were in the board's packet for consideration and possible action this evening. So I'll give everyone a minute to make sure that you have a chance to look over those again. And please let me know if there's any questions or comments on the March 4th meeting minutes. We had all commissioners present at that meeting. Are there any questions from the board? That being said, do I hear a motion to approve the March 4th meeting minutes?
So moved.
We have a
So
motion
moved.
on the floor from Commissioner Kelly. Do I hear a second?
Second.
Second from Commissioner Mobilio. All in favor? Or roll call vote, please, Renee?
Commissioner Mobilio,
Aye.
Commissioner Kelly,
Aye.
Commissioner Seton.
Aye.
Commissioner Morgan.
Aye, motion carries. Thank you, everyone. Next this evening, we have our March 11th. This is Joint Board of Commissioner Planning Commission Workshop Comprehensive Plan meeting minutes. They too are in the packet for consideration and possible action this evening. Were there any questions or comments from the board on said minutes? We had everyone present for that meeting. Is there a motion to move forward with said minutes?
Commissioner
So moved.
Morgan, just to be clear, I was present for that meeting, just to be clear.
Oh, very good. Thank you. Thank you, Commissioner Mobilio. You were absolutely right. I apologize. And the minutes do reflect that.
Right.
Good. All right. That being said, thank you. Is there a motion to approve?
Motion to approve.
We have
I'll
a motion
second.
on the floor from Commissioner Kelly. We have a second from Commissioner Seton. Can I have a roll call vote, please? Renee?
Commissioner Kelly,
Aye.
Commissioner Seton.
Aye.
Commissioner Morgan.
Aye.
And Commissioner Mobilio, do you want to mark your abstention?
Yes, I'll abstain. Thank you.
Thank you. Motion carries. All right. Last but not least on our meeting minutes for consideration tonight, we have our April 1st, 2020. These are our regular Board of Commissioner meeting minutes. This was our first virtual meeting. I will give the board a minute or two to see if there's any questions or comments on said meeting minutes.
Commissioner Morgan, I do have a question on these minutes for under notification where it states that right there on that first page, right under the board docs bold print, it says, for the record, President Morgan advised the board that they met in exec session. My recollection of that meeting was at the very end of it, right before we adjourned. I did ask the question if we needed to state for the record whether exec sessions had been held. And I recall, Tori, Ms. Morgan, that you were unsure of the dates, as was I. And Attorney Zader stated that we could go ahead and add them to today's minutes. So I know that we did have exec sessions also on March 18th and 19th that have not been talked about. And also on March 30th, we did have a training meeting.
Well, I checked earlier, so I had March 13th, March 25th, and April 15th.
We also had
Renee,
March 18th and
March 18th, you say? March 18th, and what was the other one, Ryan?
the March 19th and March 30th.
Okay, I'm not saying we didn't. I don't remember all those days. That wasn't the list that I had gotten. So Renee, would you would you be so kind as to verify the 18th and 19th and the 30th? I don't have those down. I just want to make sure we have the dates right.
Or we can table them until next time if it's a question, certainly.
Yeah, I think we should. And thank you, Diane, for bringing up those dates. It's kind of ringing a bell. I'm wondering, the subject matter is coming to my head, but let's confirm the dates and I'll make sure that they get in the meeting minutes or the meeting agenda for the next meeting. So the dates in question are the 18th, 19th, and 30th. So we'll verify those. So we do have the 13th and the 25th documented.
Yes, thank you.
No problem. Thank you. All right. Were there any other questions on the April 1st meeting minutes? Hearing none, do I hear a motion to move forward with the April 1st meeting minutes?
We're going to have a motion to table them.
Well, I don't think we necessarily need to table the minutes. The minutes can be passed. We can simply put the other executive sessions in the next agenda or to recognize the dates. Because this agenda, these minutes still are effective and accurate. It just doesn't have all the executive sessions in it. We can confirm them in the next set of minutes. It's
Well,
the
just
board's
for the
pleasure.
record,
We don't necessarily have to table them.
Right. We did not discuss those dates that are in the minutes at that meeting. We didn't discuss any dates.
You lost me there.
So I'm just, Diane, what you're suggesting is the paragraph under where there's an asterisk for boarddocs.com. You're suggesting remove the May 13th and March 25th from that set of meeting minutes and then add them back into tonight's meeting minutes when we confirm
Correct.
the other.
Correct. I'm saying that we did not discuss March 13th or 25th at the last meeting. The issue came up at the end of the meeting just before adjournment. I asked the question if we needed to state for the record our exec sessions, and the conversation was that Commissioner Morgan did not recall the dates. I didn't have them, and Mr. Zader advised us that we could go ahead and include them into today's meeting minutes.
So
That's my recollection.
Gotcha.
I would take
I get
this
it. I get it.
that paragraph.
So I say
Yes.
we can, if the board, so it's the board's pleasure, we can take that out. If there's a motion to approve the minutes with the removal of the executive session meeting dates, which we'll put in the next set once they're discussed.
I make a motion to accept the meeting minutes with the removal of the 2 lines regarding exec session.
Very good. Thank you. Sorry for the confusion. So we have a motion on the floor from Commissioner Kelly and a second from Commissioner, is that Stetton?
Yeah.
Okay, Commissioner Stetton. All in favor? Or roll call vote, please, Renee?
Commissioner Mobilio,
Aye.
Commissioner Kelly,
Aye.
Commissioner Seton.
Aye.
Commissioner Morgan.
Aye. Thank you, Diane. Sorry for the confusion on that one. Makes sense. We'll get
Thank
that clear. We'll get that one cleared up for the next meeting for sure. All right. So that answers our minutes for the agenda for today. So next this evening, we do have an ordinance. This is for discussion only. It's an advertising, a motion requesting permission to advertise. It's an ordinance amending the South Whitehall Township zoning ordinance by amending section 350-24C5 R3 low density residential zoning district schedule, section 350-24C6 R4 medium density residential zoning district schedule, section 350-24C7 R5 medium density residential zoning district schedule, section 350-24C8 R10 high density residential zoning district schedule, and Section 350-24C14, 8C-1 Highway Commercial 1 Zoning District Schedule to allow for a maximum height 40 feet for residential buildings and providing for a severability clause, retention of rights to enforce clause, a repealer clause, and an effective date. So, that was a mouthful. George, would you like to add any explanation or comment onto this before we open this up for discussion? It is an advertised only document at this point.
Yeah, just to kind of get the commissioners up to speed, this actually started in November of last year. The Board of Commissioners, through courtesy of the floor, heard and considered a request from an attorney representing Blue Barn Meadows. And specifically, that request was to amend the zoning ordinance to allow for the increase that Commissioner Morgan just noted. At the end of November, we took the matter to the Planning Commission for their informal consideration at that time. They were generally in favor, but asked that we take the proposal to the Public Safety Committee, which we did on January 13th. And they, at that meeting, really had no concerns with the proposals requested. So we came back to the board in January 15, and you all directed us to direct the applicant to submit a formal application for Planning Commission and DOC consideration. That formal consideration took place by the Planning Commission in February. They unanimously recommended the Board of Commissioners approve the amendment as proposed. I will also point out the LVPC has reviewed this as required by law, and they've listed it as a matter of local concern. A couple of just real quick discussion items. As Commissioner Morgan indicated, this is just a motion to advertise, and I'm going to turn it over to Joe in a second because I know Joe likes to talk to the board about the process for an ordinance adoption. But a couple other really quick points. Just so you know, the initial application asked for a height increase in specific districts, the ones where they had their townhomes in Blue Barn. Following the Planning Commission and staff review, it was determined that the maximum height limitation for a residential building should be made consistent throughout all zones to not only ease enforcement, but provide for consistent regulations and, quite frankly, more closely mirror the intent of the municipal planning code. So the 40-foot maximum height limitation, just so you all know, for residential buildings is already in place in other residential zoning categories, specifically the rural residential 2, the rural residential 3, and the R2 zoning districts. So this would just kind of bring all those districts into the same conformity, if you will. One thing that came out of the Planning Commission meeting, apartment buildings are not proposed to be included in this amendment because they are considered both residential, commercial in nature and already have options for greater height in place. And then one other question that arose during the Planning Commission review was, is there a minimum floor height mandated by the UCC? And we confirmed with the chief building official that there is a minimum floor height, and under the International Building Code, a residential structure that we're talking about in these districts is capped. It can't exceed 3 stories regardless. So that is basically it in a nutshell. I don't know if the applicant's here tonight. If he is, I would certainly defer to him if you have questions, and certainly for Joe if you have any questions on the process for adopting the ordinance.
Well, George, can I just jump in for a second? So
Sure.
just to be clear about something. First of all, I'm fairly certain that they came before the zoning board when I was a zoning board member to try to get it through us path of least resistance. I think we deferred to the board at that time. My concern, and I understand we're just dealing with an advertising issue at this point, but do we have any idea as to why this particular zoning district was 35 feet versus all these others that were 40 feet? I mean, do we have a legislative history, so to speak?
Yeah, I mean, the short answer is no, Matt. I mean, typically zoning has to account for life, safety, health, and welfare, as you know. So we think it's related to basically firefighting apparatus and the ability to serve a certain height. back in the day, and then he's just never really caught up. Why there's a couple at 40 now and a couple at 35, we don't really know. It's just kind of, they were either introduced like that originally or it's transitioned over time. But I can do a little more research on it and see if because Greg's been around a while. He might, just know from an institutional standpoint why they're broken up like they are.
Yeah,
I'll check on that for you.
Like I said, I know we're in an early phase, but before this comes before the board for a vote, I'd like to have a little bit better idea as to why. I mean, at some point, someone decided that it made sense for 35 feet in this district and 40 in the other. And I'm reluctant to change the entire ordinance or vote in favor of changing the entire ordinance just because the developer comes and asks for it without some kind of idea as to why it was that way.
Yeah, I'll do my best to dig into that for you.
Great, thank you, George.
I had a
George,
comment.
this is Dave Pasacco. May I say something?
Absolutely, Dave.
I myself had always assumed that it was a safety issue and it was a fire issue. And I talked to the fire marshal one day and I just mentioned that to him, and he said, no, it had nothing to do with it at all. And nobody actually seems to know where that 35-foot number even came from. But it had nothing to do with fire. Maybe it did at one point way back when, but it's apparently no longer applicable.
Well, we have to vote based on what someone at some point in time determined was appropriate. So, I need to, before I can vote yay or nay, I need to know why there's a difference. There's got to be some reason. I mean, look, at some point, someone sat down and said, I want this to be 40 feet and this to be 30 feet, and here are the reasons why, and I think we should know why before we agree to make everything the same.
George, yeah, that certainly makes sense, but apparently it's not fire.
George, if I may ask that increasing the height to 40 feet, would that permit the developer to add another floor to the building, another story, another living area?
No, Joe, it's the International Building Code limits the number of stories that can go into a residential dwelling.
It would allow them to have higher ceilings, if I remember correctly, right?
And a deeper roof pitch if
It has to do with the roof.
It's really a design consideration, to be honest.
Right.
Yeah, that's really what it is. It's really aesthetics. When you have a 3-story at 35 feet, you have to put a very, very flat roof on there, and it just does not look architecturally correct.
One thing that I can add, I don't know the genesis of the 35 feet, but I do know that back when Pulte was going through the development approval process for its development out by St. Joe's in the western end of the township off of Clouser Road, Chapman's Road, that area, that they went to the zoning hearing board for variance relief height because of the issue that Mr. Pasacco just mentioned. They were turned down, but then their plan and their schedule was such they couldn't approach the commissioners for an amendment to the ordinance. So they ended up instead having very flat roofs on some of the townhouses, particularly on the south side of Clouser, and much of the rest of the development has a lot of retaining walls that they had hoped to avoid because of the height issue. So I think it's the same issue that we're talking about here.
One thing to throw out there too is, if I remember correctly, again, I'm going back, I forget exactly when it came before the zoning board, but I remember it being talked about that historically the township has denied or refused to increase the height allowances, except in the most kind of specific of circumstances. I think there might have been a church at some point or something like that. But I think, if I remember correctly, historically, we were very stringent, very really applying the law in this case as far as the height requirements. And I could be wrong. I haven't been here as long as many people on this call, but it seems like making this move is a big departure from what historically we've done. So just to defer back to George, just to get an idea as to what the reason was for us maintaining this 35-foot height requirement in this district.
And I believe Greg Adams is on this call, so if he has any comment, I think he's on the call.
And actually, right across the property line, the next property is commercial, and those are going to be 55 or 50-foot tall warehouses.
Well, but that's not
I'd like
residential.
to- I had just a comment. Oh, go ahead.
No, go ahead, Diane.
Thank you. I just had a comment. Obviously, I do sit on the Planning Commission. I understand Mr. Pizzacco's wanting to seek relief on this. I was not aware that it had gone before zoning, so thank you, Commissioner Mobilio, for sharing that. I did have a question then, and I still do now, with the township being in the midst of an update to our comprehensive plan, which in turn will also update our zoning to make a sweeping change to all of these different zonings to all go to 40 feet just because one developer is having a problem or a concern in a particular development was a concern, and I still do have that concern because we have turned down other developments asking for changes to zoning because we are in the midst of updating our comp plan, and I would like to see us be consistent with a sweeping change to the zoning at this point as a consideration.
Well, that's a good point, Commissioner Kelly. I mean, I know we're not at that point right now where we're making specific recommendations for changing to zoning, but has there been any discussion to change the residential height requirements? I mean, is that on the agenda? Is that something that's part of this potential, part of the plan?
I don't
Part of
think
our-
No, the comp plan won't get into that specificity. The comp plan's a policy plan. The zoning ordinance is where you get into specificity. So
Right.
the distinction I think here is rezoning versus text amendment. So this is a text amendment to your regulatory document. Certainly your prerogative on which way you want to which way you want to go with it. But it's really not. It's not policy per se in the big picture of what would happen in the comp plan. That's your zoning ordinance, which kind of drives the specifics after that's over.
Right. So what I'm suggesting is if the result of the comp plan is that there are recommendations for zoning changes and recommendations for height requirement changes, if we would grant this request, grandfathered, would not, like for instance, if the recommendation later that there's a 35 height requirement across the board, this particular development is 40 feet regardless. I mean, they get to keep.
Well, it'll end up as a non-conformity. So if you approved it now and the comp plan comes out and says, we want to see smaller homes in certain districts or something like that, smaller size homes in certain districts. And if you make a zoning change after that and there's already homes at a certain height, then you create non-conformities, which are not uncommon. You have non-conformities in almost every community, but however you decide to work with it is going to be fine. I think you can always come back and change your zoning ordinance if you decide to do it, or you can just leave it as it is and watch how the comp plan plays out.
All right, thanks, George.
So, George, you left me with more questions than answers now at this point. So what are our options at this point then, with the concerns that Commissioner Mobilio and Commissioner Kelly mentioned? What are the options? What are we left with?
Well, I mean, this is an order. This is a legislative ask of you from the developer. Your options are to, as far as I know, either approve or not approve, or approve and you could modify, I suppose. I would defer to Joe on that, but I think it's just yay or nay at this point.
We're just talking about advertising at this point. We're not, I mean,
Correct.
there's no basis to say no to advertising. I mean, we're just spitballing right now as to what we might do down the line when it comes before us. Is that fair to say, or?
Matt, what would happen if you opt to
No.
advertise by vote this evening? It would then proceed to a public hearing pursuant to public notice. The advertising is for notice of the possible ordinance adoption and the public hearing. And so at a future meeting of the commissioners, There would be a formal public hearing at which this matter would be considered, much like we've done with public hearings in the past, although this time it would be virtual, obviously. And ultimately, you can vote for, you can vote against, or you can table it. And unlike certain other actions, this is one where the timetable is really up to you. And if you do have a public hearing, there's a time limit in which you have to vote. And if you don't vote within that time limit, I think from memory it's 90 days, then you'd have to redo the public hearing. If you have any modifications to the ordinance as it goes through the public hearing process, then the procedure that George outlined earlier, where it goes through the Planning Commission and the Lehigh Valley Planning Commission, that would have to be repeated if you have modifications to it. But it's a legislative act, so it's totally up to the board how you want to proceed.
Thanks, Joe.
Could you please remind us, George, which zone is the Pizzacco development pertaining to?
Give me 1 second.
In reading this ordinance that's proposed, it looks like the Board of Commissioners had adopted this new zoning ordinance in April of 17. So it's just 3 years since we updated this particular section. And if we'll be redoing our zoning or updating it then probably next year or so, is that the timeline, George?
Hey, George, it's Greg Adams. Can you hear me?
Commissioner Kelly, I think the timeline, it may end up getting pushed back a bit because our comp plan process is a bit on hold because it's difficult to have the public meetings now that we really want to have to continue to move that forward. So I don't know if we would get to a zoning ordinance as early as next year. Certainly, once the comp plan's done, that would be the next logical step, that and the subdivision and land development ordinance.
George, I think Greg Adams is on the line too, so he was chatting.
Yes, Diane's question is to which zoning districts the Pizzacco development are. That's R5 and R10.
Thank you.
And just to be clear, it's already 40 feet in 4 other zoning categories: the RR, RR2, RR3, and R2.
R10 is a high density, right?
Yes, that's correct.
I mean, again, anyone who listens to me talk at any of these meetings probably tired of hearing me refer to myself as a lawyer, but it concerns me as an attorney where I hear one district is, someone decided at some point it's 35 feet and in other districts it's 40 feet, because it makes me believe that there's a valid reason that a majority of the board at some point in time decided that it was 35 feet was appropriate for this district and not for others. So not to be a dead horse, but again, I would like to know a little bit more why possible the previous board took that decision.
So at this point, would it make sense to table this so that we can get more information to that history?
Greg,
George,
do you think you'll be able to find that history?
Yeah, I believe so. I was actually here for when the more rural districts were moved from 35 to 40 feet. I believe the 35 foot goes way back into our history, into the perhaps 1980s. The change to the rural districts was made probably in 15 years ago, and that was in response to basically peaked roofs. The concern that more rural districts would have larger houses by breadth and depth. Thus, a peaked roof at one angle on a smaller house would be lower than a peaked roof on a larger house. And really, it was driven by aesthetics. The change from 35 to 40 was driven by aesthetics then. So I'm not quite sure why the original 35-foot was in place, but it does reach back probably at least to the 1980s.
I mean, to be fair, I'm not concerned why the original 35-foot was in place. I'm only concerned about why only some districts were changed to 40, not the district we're talking about. So we don't have to go
And
back
others
to.
weren't.
Yeah, I mainly believe that it was brought up because developers who were, at least one developer who was looking at houses in a more rural district was looking at bigger square footage houses. So the peaked roof would, over a wider stretch of house would go higher. And that was the whole driver of the increase back then.
Okay, so there was a developer back in the day who wanted to build in certain districts, and so we changed the ordinance to satisfy that developer. But because he didn't want to build in the district we're talking about now, we didn't need to change it for this one. Is that what you're saying?
That is my recollection, yes.
Okay.
Madam Chairman, this is Blake Morrow. Can I help with the history?
Oh, Blake, welcome. Sure. Thank you.
My best recollection is that all of the residential zones were 35 feet until the fire company got a ladder truck. And actually everything, as I recall, was 35 feet. And then the Roma building happened. A ladder truck came into the township and was more readily available than the one from Allentown. And the height limitation wasn't as big a deal, but nobody gave it a whole lot of thought. I think it was a house in Winchester Heights or Winchester West that first came before the zoning hearing board for a height variance, basing it on aesthetics. And I think that variance was granted, and that's what started the discussion about why are things 35 feet. And then everything jumps to 40 feet. My guess is the 35-foot district was simply a carryover that nobody thought through because it is inconsistent with most of the other residential zones. And it absolutely was an aesthetic issue that the old Dutch colonials and bi-levels didn't require the slope roofs that some of the larger homes up on the ridge required. Hope that's helpful.
Thank you, Blake.
And one more question, George. I know the update to the ordinances back in December of 18 also provided for credits for extra height in certain districts. Does that play into this? Are these the same districts that were affected by that?
You're talking about the overlay zones?
Yes.
Yeah, no, this does not pertain in any way to the overlay zones. Just the base districts.
So under these, there'll be no additional height allowed through credit, the way that they are through
the overlays retain the credit. So like, like certain developers will take advantage of the credits that are available under the overlay zone. But this is not even remotely related to that. This is just simply base district height.
So are there any other questions from the board on this topic? I do want to open it up to the public to make sure that we get any questions answered. Steve, can you see if there's any questions from the public? I don't see anybody, any comments or anything.
Yeah, I don't see anything from the chat, but if someone wants to unmute themselves and speak, you're welcome to.
All right, assuming there's no further questions, we do have an ordinance for advertising only on the agenda. I believe we do need a motion to advertise if we want to move forward with it. Is there a motion to move forward with the ordinance as as read and explained by the board? Is the pleasure of the board to continue to gather additional information on the history of the height requirements and then put this item back on the agenda for the next meeting?
Well, Commissioner Morgan, just to chime in, I don't have a problem with voting in favor of it being advertised, but I would just caution whoever's listening or whoever has an interest in this, that without some kind of explanation as to why this change is necessary other than for their own interests, that, you know, it'll be hard for me to vote in favor of something without the legislative history. So I'm happy for it to move forward with advertising, knowing that we will have to vote on the final decision right now. I need more information before I can decide to vote in favor.
Well, if we need more information, might it make sense to table it at this point instead of advertising? Because if we were to not want to approve this in its entirety, my understanding, the way George explained it, is it would have to go back through planning and the High Valley Planning Commission. Would have to take an extra path back through.
As far as if it's modified, you mean? If it's modified, that would be the case.
If it's modified, it's got to go back to planning.
Correct. Well, I would be comfortable making a motion to table this until the next meeting so that we can discuss this further as a board. Obviously, there's a lot of questions still.
Well, let's even clarify that. Let's clarify that a little bit further too. I agree as well, but let's make it clear what we want to come back. So maybe we could get more of a history on this 35-foot thing. Make sure it makes sense. Get the details back to the board in time to put it on the next agenda, so a decision can be made on whether or not we're going to move forward with this action. You know, out of respect to the you know, whoever's interested in it as well. So George and Greg and Renee and anybody else involved, is that something that you could put together and get some information prior to the next meeting?
Sure.
Is that,
Yes.
and the board's comfortable with that approach?
Well, Commissioner Morgan, I would just add to that, you know, personally, I don't think it's necessarily the duty of the township to prove the developer's request. I mean, I think it would behoove the person requesting the ordinance change to provide some of their own information, if, you know, whether it's in a brief form or something else. I don't think we should be using necessarily township resources to be proving their.
But it's an ordinance change. It's not a specific waiver. It's a complete. Right,
but who requested the ordinance change?
Right. It was brought by a private. The change was brought by a developer. But
right. So if it's their request for an ordinance change, I think it's incumbent upon them to provide the background necessary for us to have the information to make a decision. I'm not saying that George and Renee shouldn't do their own due diligence, but, you know, our due diligence for the township is independent of whether this should be done yay or nay. If the developer has an interest in having this passed, then they should provide their own information as well.
So with that thinking, then this is push this more into a waiver request than the developer should present for this particular development and be able to submit the information that Matt's talking about.
Well, it wouldn't be a waiver because this isn't a subdivision and land development ordinance issue. What would happen probably if this didn't move forward is, like Matt said, developers would go back to if they found a real need to exceed the height, they'd have to go back to the zoning hearing board and ask for that relief. And whether or not the board would grant that would be obviously up to them. So this really doesn't get into like a waiver. So it doesn't really relate to the SALDO at all. It's actually a zoning ordinance provision.
But the request for the change of the heights is for a subdivision that's already an approved subdivision. Am I correct?
The developer that brought this request has an active subdivision going on right now. If you'll recall, I think he just approved phase 3. So I think what they were looking for, I don't want to speak on behalf of the developer. I think he's here, but I think what they were looking for was the opportunity to do townhomes at 40 feet versus the 35 that's permitted now. And the reason being just what you all have talked about is basically the aesthetics, the opportunity to pitch the roofs a little bit more, make them a little more appealing.
So my question would be maybe an engineering question to Tony. If the roofs become bigger, which they will because of the pitch, would that make any difference on the water management?
I would say that the surface area of the building itself wouldn't change. The roofs would get higher, but the footprint of the house would stay the same if I'm not mistaken. So I would say no, there would be nothing. It wouldn't affect the stormwater in this respect.
Okay. Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Well, just going back to what we were talking about before, I don't have a problem with the advertising, but when we actually have the decision to make, if there's not sufficient information, whether it's provided by the developer or the township, as to why this change was made to begin with, that it's, I guess it's a roll of the dice for the requester as to whether we have enough information to rule in their favor or not, so it'll be in their lap.
Looks like there's a question in the messages from someone on the line. I don't know if Steve saw that.
I can't see the questions. How do I see the questions?
Go to the chat.
If you
It's
click
from
on the comments, so there's
David,
David, would you like? Yeah, it's not. I don't know if it's a question. It looks like comments. David, would you like to speak? You can turn your mic off or turn the little. There you go.
I think I'm on, right?
You got it, bud.
My question is that I was at the meeting when the developer requested the 40-foot height, okay? And it was for aesthetics, as stated, and it was for a very special type of architectural building, and that is I think it's a 3-story apartment with garage at the bottom, I believe. Is that correct? So
Townhouse.
he was saying the pitch of the roof doesn't look very nice with the 35-foot limit. So if we could extend it to 40-foot, it would make a much nicer looking place. Earlier, I heard Greg Adams say the development of a 40-foot in certain areas was for these extra large houses, which made a roof look, or the whole house look architecturally a lot better if it were 40-foot height, because it was a very big home, okay? The question is, if you extend this to other zoning areas like R4, do you really want 40-foot height in R4 smaller homes and the potential for that? It breaks away from the tradition. And how about an existing, say, R4 development, which again might have a few empty lots, and you end up putting a couple 40-foot high homes in there? Just a question.
Thank you, David. So, maybe as part of this, research, is that something that we need staff to take a look at?
It seems like the initial request was, again, for that specific type of home. And to make it look better, to have it. So I don't quite understand why we extend it to other zone areas.
I had trouble hearing you, David. You have a lot of backseat on your phone. I don't know if you're on.
I'm on the phone though. Okay.
Try again.
Okay. My statement was, can you hear me better?
I can. Thank you.
Okay. My statement was his specific request was for a particular type of architecture that he's building at Blue Barn. And I guess I'm wondering, do you really want to extend that request to other types of architecture? And maybe it does deserve more research and understanding exactly what you're doing before that's done.
Thank you. Yeah, I think that was the direction the board's leaning towards anyways, unless there's been some different thought through this discussion. It sounds to me like some more information needs to be gathered before any further action on this, even with the advertising. Am I reading the board correctly?
Yes.
Yes.
It's hard when I can't see anybody. So it sounds to me at this point, since there was no motion to move forward with this to advertise, the direction of the board is to table this one until the next meeting to the developer and for staff to the best of their abilities to gather some more information, historical and background, to make sure that this change makes sense across the board. And then we can feed back at the next meeting. Sound good?
Sounds good.
Are there any other comments, questions?
It looks like there's another chat question.
All right. Yep, we have somebody for Robert Hodges. I'm concerned that this request will open the door for increased height in other forthcoming developments. This is a statement, not a question. Thank you, Mr. Hodges. We'll make sure and take that under consideration. So I think at this point, and I feel it is up to the developer making the request to explain why this should be good for the township, not just the township. He's not just the developer. So yeah, I agree. I think it's a joint effort between the township and the developer to determine whether or not this is provides more background information. So with that being said, it sounds to me like the decision is to table this one until the next meeting, gather a little more information, feedback to the board to find the best movement forward.
Agreed.
Sounds
All right.
good.
So no, Joe Stetton, Attorney Stetton, I just made you an attorney. Commissioner Stetton, good?
Yeah, I agree.
Okay, very good. All right. We'll be tabling that one for tonight's meeting, moving forward with more information for the next meeting. Next this evening for consideration and possible action, we have a variety of resolutions. The first is a resolution amending resolution number 2019-65, granted a waiver of a subdivision and land development review and approval requirements of the South Whitehall Township SALDO for a plan entitled Village West Redevelopment relating to properties located at 3100 West Tillman Street and granting an additional waiver pursuant to SALDO sections 312-13F3 and 312-43. George, would you like to present on this one, please?
I will do it quickly because this one is really brought by the applicant, so there's not been a lot of staff involvement with it. But as you recall, Panera's is moving from their current location in Village West main shopping center to that out parcel where Outback Steakhouse was located. They would have an outdoor dining patio and a drive-through pickup window. In December of last year, December 18, the BOC granted a land development waiver to this project, subject to 9 conditions. And you mentioned, Commissioner Morgan, that resolution is 2019-65. The applicant has since provided a letter requesting the ability to file for a building permit prior to plan recordation. So that is the request. The SALDO requires that a plan be recorded before a building permit can be issued. So I will turn it over to the applicant to explain why they want to make this request.
Who's here this evening to represent the applicant, George?
Do you hear me? Good evening.
Hi.
Oh, hi. Hello, everyone. This is Brian Conlon. I'm with Langen Engineering, the project engineer for the development. And I'm going to start first, and then also is Lucas Heverly is on the meeting. Lucas is a development director for Brixmore Property Group, who is the owner of the shopping center and the applicant. And we're here tonight, virtually here tonight. Basically, as Mr. Kinney just explained, we got our waiver of lien development back in December, and this is for a Panera to take the out parcel of the out parcel in front there, the space with the drive-through and the outdoor patio, as explained. We've agreed to all conditions, and we still have a couple comments outstanding on the engineer's letter. And we brought this up about a month ago, prior to the pandemic that's currently, is stopping everything. And we hope we don't even need the waiver, but we are requesting it for the fact that Panera actually is ready to go. And when I say ready to go, for their internal building renovations, they're ready to roll and they're ready to go. But we're being held up. They're being held up on their building permit because of our land development for the drive-through. We are going to comply with all of the land development comments. We have 3 more outstanding from Pidcock Engineering, very minor comments that we actually just received 2 days ago. We're going to address them and get them in, but the applicant is concerned, that once they are fully approved, then going through the recording process, getting the signatures, that could take a month or however long that takes. And if Panera, our request is if Panera can start the internal building work, if they can get their permit while we're working on that recording, if that happens later. Of course, we wouldn't do any of the land development work that's associated with our plan, just be for the internal building work for Panera. So that's the request. Again, hopefully we don't need that, because construction we know can't happen now, and hopefully we get our approval and all of this buttoned up in the next couple of weeks, before the pandemic or the restrictions end. But in case that doesn't happen, again, that the request is to see if Panera can start their internal work prior to getting the plans recorded, if necessary.
So this is driven to basically so that you could continue the work, which would all be internal.
That's correct.
I would add for, I'm sorry, Commissioner.
Go ahead. Welcome, Lucas.
I would just, no, this is George again, sorry. I just wanted to add that if the commission is inclined to grant this waiver, we could indeed probably, I think we have the ability and the authority to condition the permit such that a certificate of occupancy wouldn't be issued until the plan is recorded. So if you're worried about not having the ability to ensure that the plan will be recorded, that would be it.
Okay.
What's the exposure to the township to allow them to start building without final recording?
If you're talking about legally, I'll look at Joe and see if he has. I don't know. I think we've actually done this before. It's what's unique about this one is that it's not. There's like he said, it's really not exterior construction. It's interior construction. So typically, if the drive-through wasn't there, he'd have had a building permit a long time ago. So it's the drive-through that's driving the plan recordation, like he said. But I'm not sure of any legal. I'm not sure of anything on the legal side.
If this were ground up new construction and a building permit was being requested to put a foundation in and start the sticks going up, it'd be a different analysis. But here, the developer, the property owner, actually could have requested to make these internal renovations without filing a land development plan. The land development plan is for what's going on externally. So in my view, this is a different type of request than what was really intended by the SALDO itself.
I mean, at the end of the day, it sounds like at best they'd have an equitable argument about inequity against the seller or the landowner, but it had nothing to do with the township. Is that kind of fair to say, or? I mean, as far as like, I mean, at the end of the day, if they can't get the deed recorded or the plan recorded for whatever reason, that's not going to affect the township at all.
Correct, in this instance. If they have a problem that they can't get recorded and can't do the drive-through the way they wanted, then maybe they've spent money which they hadn't spent on the internal renovations, but it doesn't harm the township. And of course, the township will be inspecting the work internally under applicable codes.
Got it. Thank you.
And what is the delay with the recording? I'm not understanding the issue there.
Yeah, this is Brian Conlon again. Yeah, not really an issue, I'd say. I know since we got the plan approved in December, there was a little lag early in the year, January, but then we've gone back and forth with your consultants over the past, several months since the beginning of the new year, basically, and we got down to where we got the public works approval, a sign off, zoning approval, and we're down to just the civil engineer. And when I said we just got 3 last comments the other day, minor comments, it's just been a back and forth. And then when we would make a submission, the reviews have typically been, a month, which is typical. But, and then we'd resubmit the plans, a week or so later. So just timing has gone by. And again, this was more so they were ready before, the world changed about a month ago when we made the initial request. So we're hopeful we don't need it. It's just a matter of, getting the final plan recorded, the signatures, which we anticipate should happen in the next couple of weeks, but just in case it drags, another month or for whatever reason, that's the only issue with the timing. While Panera, again, we're hopeful if the board, will accept our request, the Panera, while we're doing this, at least can get things started because obviously they're answering to get their operations open.
It seems to me that obviously there's a fail-safe for the township, obviously, with what George had mentioned about recording the plan. And if this is something that's feasible and not setting a bad precedent, and we've done it before and makes sense because it's all internal for the business and is a way for the business to keep motion moving forward, I certainly would recommend this at this point. So if there's no other questions or comments, I would certainly make a motion to move forward with this resolution.
I'll second it.
Were there any other questions or comments on this particular subject before we take a vote?
I just had a question on what the engineering letters that he's referencing, what is left to be dealt with then that is precipitating this waiver request?
Very, there's 3 comments. One comment about we have an ADA ramp like that kind of goes across where the drive-through area is, and it was just a comment about the placement of the ADA ramp. We have to rotate it, so to speak. I mean, very, very minor. The other comment was actually just a typo type comment on the sheet numbers. One of the sheets didn't have the correct date on it. And then the third one was basically a detail, one of the construction details. They just asked us, that we had the detail that had Pidcock's name on it, and they actually asked us just to clip their name off of the detail, or just orient the detail in a different way. And just for everyone's benefit, we've actually had those revisions. We just got the letter. I want to say yesterday. It might have been the day before, but we've revised the plans, and we anticipate we will be submitting them back to Pidcock tomorrow for review. So again, we're not holding up anything on our end. We certainly intend to get everything done. But again, this is more just a fail-safe in case it takes a little longer than we hope.
Thank you.
All right. That being said, we have a motion on the floor from Commissioner Morgan. We have a second from Commissioner Mobilio. Could I have a roll call vote, please, Renee?
Commissioner Mobilio.
Aye.
Commissioner Kelly.
Aye.
Commissioner Seton.
Aye.
Commissioner Morgan.
Aye. Motion carries. Resolution passes. Good luck, gentlemen.
Thank you, everyone. Have a great night.
Thank you, you too.
All right, next this evening for consideration and possible action, we have a resolution amending resolution number 2019-52, which granted preliminary final approval to a minor plan entitled John Jandal to include an additional waiver granted to Saldo section 312-36D4. And tonight, I know we have Lisa Pereira here to represent on our legal side. And George, did you want to introduce this one, or Lisa, were you going to go right in on it?
I can just very quickly I mean, you pretty much hit on it, Commissioner Morgan, but this is another resolution. It was approved back in October of last year. The BOC granted preliminary and final plan approval to it's called the John Jandal subdivision, for those of you that were here will recall. The project was subject to several conditions. At this point, I believe the applicant is asking for a waiver from one of those provisions that was in that approved resolution. I'll go ahead and turn it over to either Lisa or the applicant.
Lisa Pereira here. I'll just briefly explain the waiver request. The applicant who is represented here this evening by Wendy Nicolosi, and I believe actually Mr. Jandal may be on the call as well. They are seeking a waiver from having to pay the $2,500 open space fee. This property, if the board recalls, is located partially in North Whitehall Township as well. And the residential home that is built upon that land is located on the North Whitehall Township side of the line. And they are currently, as part of this subdivision plan, paying to North Whitehall Township another $2,500 fee. So they are requesting waiver from South Whitehall so that they don't have to pay the same fee in two municipalities, considering that the home is located in North Whitehall Township.
Thank you, Lisa.
And has the applicant requested any kind of refund from North Whitehall Township?
Hi, this is Wendy Nicolosi. I'm here. Yes, we have. Their position is the dwelling itself is actually taxed in North Whitehall, not South Whitehall. So North Whitehall's position is the property, the dwelling is actually in their municipality, so they do not want to waive the fee.
So is it the applicant's position that, and I assume that Mr. Jandal is well familiar with the laws and ordinances and fees involved in North and South Whitehall Township, is the applicant's position that they didn't know that there would be an issue here and they just paid the fee to North Whitehall and were hoping that we would never come asking for the money?
I don't think anybody realized it was assessed by both municipalities. And actually it came up at the time when we were getting ready for plan recording and determining the fees. And at that point, we realized it was actually being charged for the same dwelling in both municipalities.
Was there no survey was finalized?
I'm sorry? I didn't.
Was there not a survey done to determine whether the property was in both municipalities?
Well, I believe the subdivision plan does show the line of the municipality and it does go straight down through the property. But in this case, when that happens, obviously there's a determination as to where the dwelling is assessed, and it's actually assessed in North Whitehall. So I mean, it's the same dwelling, it's just being double charged, and it seems the equitable solution would be to pay to North Whitehall since that's where the dwelling is actually taxed.
Well, wouldn't the equitable solution be to pay our township $1,250 and then try to seek the remaining difference from North Whitehall?
Again, if you work that with North Whitehall, that'd be wonderful. But unfortunately, at this point, their position is the dwellings in their township.
So you want us to take it up with North Whitehall?
No, not at all. I'm just saying we're requesting the waiver from the fee in South Whitehall, since this is one single dwelling being assessed by two different townships. And since the dwelling is in fact taxed in North Whitehall, it seems as though North Whitehall would be more appropriate for them to get the fee.
So George, I have a question. So are the fees for us based on the dwelling or the property? Is that how does it, is it based on?
It's just that, it's that standard park and rec fee. It's that $2,500 standard park and rec fee. So it was resolution condition number 3 that be paid. So that's what they're asking. They're asking to waive that provision. Are you asking how it's calculated?
It's calculated based on dwellings.
Yeah, it's the minimum. All residential is $2,500. And then if it gets bigger if there's, Greg can probably explain it better than I am if he's still on the phone, but the amount gets larger depending on the size of the project.
Yes, George, Greg Adams. The ordinance actually stipulates that anytime a residential lot is created, a lot that can hold a house within the township, that's what is charged the fee. So anytime you create a lot that can hold a house, that's when you trigger the fee.
So the fee is not applicable to a vacant lot?
Well, what's unique here, Joe, is that this lot, the house was there. So they basically created the lot around an existing house. And then the balance of the property is the farm field around it, basically.
Right, but the lot itself can house a residential unit, correct? Is that fair to say?
Correct.
So therefore, they owe the fee, correct?
That was articulated in the resolution, and that's what they're asking relief from.
So, but technically, wouldn't it? I'm just trying to understand this because this is unique because it's in 2 townships. If the fee goes with the lot, I think it would have made sense, and I'm not sure whose responsibility it would have been, that the fee should have been split amongst the 2 townships. I don't know if I necessarily agree that anybody should have to pay the fee twice for the same development in 2 townships just because the line runs through the middle of their property. So is there some happy medium we can come to here that meets the satisfaction of the township, but also, is fair to the property owner? Because that just doesn't seem right that they should have to pay the same fee twice just because their property is split down the middle by 2 townships.
May I suggest maybe if the developer will agree to it and the rest of the commissioners, if we get what we might have thought to be our share, which would have been $1,250, that'd be acceptable?
I think that's an excellent resolution. I think that the fair and equitable solution would be the township gets $1,250, and then if the property owner thinks they pay too much in North Whitehall, they can go and appeal and do whatever they have to do with North Whitehall.
Commissioner Morgan, can I say something, please?
Oh, please, David, welcome.
Yeah, that Matt and I couldn't see who was speaking before that. That is unreasonable. It's not fair. I just happened to come on the call here because I thought this was, quite frankly, a no-brainer, an easy one. But all you have to do is look at when the typical subdivision, which you had some in your township in the past, when the subdivision crossed township lines, which you have some, it was always determined where the house was located, not the property, but the house was located. So that's how you should look at it. We're paying it one time. We're paying to North Whitehall. We'll certainly take one more attempt with North Whitehall and try to appeal to them to split it between South Whitehall and North Whitehall. But it's not a reasonable position because all townships do it the same way.
I think the moral of the story is pay South Whitehall first and then go to the other township to ask for the waiver.
Not going to happen.
Oh, yeah? All right.
Not going to happen.
Okay.
Yeah, all we're asking you to do is be reasonable and consistent with what you've done in this township before.
Oh, that's a good question. So George, in the past, if we've had other developments that have split down the middle, how does that? I mean, do we have a history on that?
This is the first since I've been here, so I haven't seen this situation before.
Let me just share another fact, if I may. There was a house on this existing lot. This is a 200-acre farm. This is my nephew who manages the farm operation for me, the agricultural operation. He's building a house for his family. He built a house for his family. This was the location he liked. It's in North Whitehall, but the access comes through South Whitehall. But we had a house on this property in the past. One of our farm hands lived in it for years. It accessed the property at exactly the same location in South Whitehall Township on exactly the same road. And that house was taken down and this house was built. It's unreasonable. Actually, I think it's unreasonable to charge in either township, but we're not paying it twice. We're paying it once. It makes most sense in North Whitehall because they're in there. We'll be happy to give it one more try to see if they'll split it. But I would really prefer if you vote on it tonight based upon no fee at all.
Mr. Jandal, you have, is this the other person on the phone? I'm sorry, I forgot who it was your representative. Is that your attorney? I'm sorry, I missed.
Yep, that's our attorney. He's right.
Okay. And you're paying her what, $300 an hour to be here?
Yeah, and the longer you drag this out, Matt, the more it costs me. So you're right.
Right. So you've probably to this point already paid her more than what you should be paying us as equitable resolution to this. So
Matt, we're not going to pay it $12.50. But Matt, it's a principle. That's
right.
That would be the township stealing from us, and we're not going to let that happen.
We're stealing from you.
Your proposal, that's exactly what it would be.
Okay. Well,
Okay.
we'll keep that statement in mind when we decide on our vote.
I
have a question.
Let me just say.
So all right. So we have a couple questions on the call. So Commissioner Kelly, what was your question?
My question was going back to this development obviously went through planning and the BOC. Did this issue come up between, with any of those boards and if not, why didn't it? Was this not known in the process that there would be a fee, as Greg Adams said, because a lot was created that could hold a house triggers the fee? The Planning Commission, the Community Development Department knew that, so it was part of the plan. It went before the Board of Commissioners for approval. I guess I'm curious why now this is coming back after the fact.
Are you asking me, Diane?
You or your attorney, yes. Why through the land development process and approvals through South Whitehall, it must have been evident that a fee from North Whitehall and South Whitehall, because of their respective ordinances, this would be triggered by both. Was this part of the conversation as this made its way through the land development process in South Whitehall?
This was brought up some time ago, and it came up as Wendy suggested earlier at the time of recording. And this was a minor subdivision. It was a subdivision that took, quite frankly, longer than it should have. It was a mistake to have it in the resolution of South Whitehall Township, and quite frankly, it was missed on our side. It was a minor subdivision, and it was just missed.
Thank you.
If I could just interject while you're still discussing this, it's been my experience, throughout the Lehigh Valley, there are a lot of subdivisions that straddle two different municipalities, and there's always a determination made as to when there's a bisected lot, one township gets it, they don't double dip on the same lot. And that's really the situation we have here. We have one single house and two different municipalities are charging for it. So, I mean, again, we're just asking for something that's reasonable and equitable, that it's one house and it's being charged twice.
Reasonable and equitable is you and your client doing their due diligence to make sure that every municipality that their property is in is getting their fair share of what's owed. You cannot pay one municipality and then come to the other and expect a waiver when it was a failure of your own lack of due diligence to identify who owed what.
I understand that, but we always do have the ability to request a waiver, and we are requesting it at this point. I think the waiver is justified, and I've been involved earlier. Hopefully I would have noticed it, and we wouldn't be having to come back, and we would have brought this up the first time. But since it's been caught now, that's why we're asking for the waiver at this point.
I have one more question. If this entire piece of land, this whole property that we're talking about was all in South Whitehall, would the fee still be $2,500 or would it be more based on the land and the home?
No, it would still be $2,500 because it is just one dwelling.
Is it your and your client's position that you will not agree to pay the $1,250 that Commissioner Seton has proposed as a resolution for this?
It's our position that we'll be happy to go back to North Whitehall. If North Whitehall agrees, we will not pay, we will not pay more than one full recreation for one full recreation fee for one dwelling. We will not pay more than that.
Right, but you understand that today's vote is based on whether we'll agree to your waiver or not. So if we reject the waiver, you're on the hook for $2,500 to us. So we're offering you a way to resolve it with us for $1,250. And you're not answering the question. Will you do that or not?
Well, I'll answer it again. If you're saying is we'll pay, if the township, if North Whitehall does not agree to split it, will we also pay, in addition to the $2,500 North Whitehall, will we pay $1,250 in South Whitehall? And the answer is hell no. Matt, it's unreasonable. It's unreasonable for you to even request that.
So
okay.
I think there's a question from, can I ask, I'm going to interject here for a second. I know Commissioner Seton, you were trying to speak earlier. Did you want to add something?
I'm going to add just, we're talking, yes, there is maybe a principle in it, but we're talking about very little money. And I'm not sure that it's worth the township to have all the people that we have behind us, paying them for sitting here and listening to this for a $1,250 payment. I personally feel that at this point, we should just, regardless of the principle of that, just let it go and forget about it.
I have to say, this is my opinion. I'm not going to speak for anybody else on this board. I think that this was an oversight not only by the developer, and which you guys already admitted, but also by the township. We have a certain level of responsibility too in understanding the dynamics, knowing that this was split down the middle. So I have to say, I don't believe, and I said it in the beginning of my statement when we first started the conversation, I don't believe anybody should have to pay the fee twice. I think that that's not fair. I definitely don't agree with that. If we could come to a middle ground, I would love to see that. But I definitely don't agree that the fee should have to be paid twice. And to go round and round on this and spend hours in legal money over $1,200 doesn't make a whole lot of sense either. So I think we need to come to some resolution on this and move forward. That's just my opinion. So Diane, I know you had some other comments. I apologize for interrupting. Did you want to go on?
No problem. Yes, I did have one comment. I know that there's Planning Commission members on the line. I do recall when this came before the Planning Commission that we did ask about the North Whitehall and had they gotten in touch with them. And I don't want to put someone on the spot, but I believe Brian Height and Mr. McNair may be on the line. They may be able to speak
Brian
to
has
that.
a comment. Brian, you have a comment. You want to speak, please? Thank you.
Yep, I remember when this came to the Planning Commission. It came to our township before it came to North Whitehall. We actually put it in the conditions of approval that they had to get concurrence with North Whitehall. And my only real question is, and I don't recall if this went to our Park and Rec Commission and what their recommendation was. If that was vetted out by them, sometimes they calculate the fee. It should have been caught way before it even came to Planning Commission. So I'm not sure where it stood there, but I do remember that it came to us before it went to North Whitehall. And we had a lot of discussion about the access and the right of way and stuff like that. And I agree that they shouldn't have to pay $2,500 twice, but I think it should be split. Thank you.
Thank you, Brian.
Thank you, Brian.
So, is there anybody else, any other questions or comments on this subject matter? We do have a resolution on the floor this evening for consideration. I will say this, I did like the thought of trying to be able to split the fee. I understand the position of not wanting to pay more than what's required by either township. I can certainly concur with that. I would hope that Wendy and David, that you could work with North Whitehall to split that fee, and it should have been done from the get-go. But it would be my position that based on this particular situation, I just can't justify having anybody have to pay the fee twice. So I would make a motion to waive the saldo at this point.
I will second it, providing that Mr. Jendal will make an effort to reach out to North Whitehall Township and try and get some of that monies to our township.
That being said, we do have a motion. Go ahead, Diane.
I'm sorry, I was going to say, would it make sense to table this so that they can go to North Whitehall and we can come to an agreement to satisfy both townships?
Diane, we're talking about so little money that for us to go ahead and open the floor again with an attorney and everybody else involved in it, it's just not worth it.
Well, I'll chime in to say that I am against it. I will vote against it when I get my opportunity to vote against it. So I can't decide what Commissioner Kelly's going to do, but if this gets voted 2-2, that means the resolution does not pass. So I think that it's incumbent upon the applicant to reconsider their position, whether to go to North Whitehall or to pay us $12.50 to make that equitable.
Let me just, may I speak, Tori?
Please.
What I would suggest, Diane, if and I understand about coming back, but I think Commissioner Sitton is right. The time we spent, and as Matt suggested earlier, we spent too much time on this already, and I agree with that. What I will do is we'll give you our word, but go to North Whitehall. But if North Whitehall said no, we'd still come back with the same request. So all I would suggest, Diane, if we could vote on it tonight, I will give you our word that we'll go to North Whitehall and make a honest plea to split the fee between the municipalities.
Would you copy us on it?
Be happy to.
So we do have a motion on the floor and a second by Commissioner Stetton. So we will do a roll call vote. Renee?
Commissioner Mobilio.
No.
Commissioner Kelly.
I am going to vote nay for the reasons that I spoke of earlier, that I do recall this coming before planning and that we did ask the developer to go to North Whitehall and they assured us that that was taken care of, and this was included in one of the stipulations of the land development process.
Commissioner Stetton.
Yep.
Commissioner Morgan.
Aye. So the motion does not pass. This is a 2-2 vote, so it will have to come back in front of the board at the next meeting if it wants further consideration. So, go ahead, David.
No, I was just going to say, I appreciate your time, Commissioner Morgan. Unreasonable position. We appreciate your time. We'll be back at the next meeting.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right. Next for consideration this evening, we have a resolution to proceed with the DCED grant request in the amount of $250,000 with regard to the Greenway Trails and Recreation Program to support the Vistas Park project. Randy and Mike Cookitz are both with us this evening. Welcome.
Yes, thank you, everybody. I'm going to turn this over to Mike here in a second, but the gist of this one is very similar to what we just did at our last meeting for a very, very similar grant. That was a DCNR grant for also $250,000. This is another grant application that would be used as a match to that DCNR grant. This is also for $250,000. So I'll turn over to Mike here for a couple more details.
Sure, thanks, Randy. Good evening, everyone. As Randy said, this is very similar to the DCNR grant. This is just through the Department of Community and Economic Development. It's funded through the CFA, and we weren't quite ready to present this last meeting. That's why we're coming back to the board this evening with another request. Through the Greenways Trails and Recreation Program grant, we can request up to $250,000, and it can match the DCNR funds. So if we are successful on both grants, they are able to match each other. If unsuccessful, this one has a 15% match, which would be $37,500. But we're hopeful that we'll get both grants. I've had some discussions with the director of the CFA in Harrisburg, and he thinks the project aligns well with their funding. The only potential hiccup may be this pandemic, and that would just be more of a delay than anything.
Fantastic. Mike, thank you for that presentation. Are there any questions or comments for Mike or Randy on this particular grant request? It sounds like a great opportunity for a matcher for the last one. So any questions from the board?
I just had a comment. I'm not opposed to matching the other grant, but I'm going to mirror what I said at the April 1st meeting. If this doesn't go through, as Mike said, it would be a 15% match. I guess I just have a more global question that the Vistas project wasn't, I didn't see it in our budget for this year. Is that a budgeted item for us to be moving forward with this proposal at this time?
No, those funds, Diane, would be budgeted in subsequent years. This project, we wouldn't be hearing from either DCNR or DCED likely until November, December. So at that point in time, we'd be able to budget in 2021, but there's nothing in the 2020 budget to support the project, nor does there really need to be at this point in time. I think the budgeting of it will really take place in subsequent years, 2021, 2022. Those future budget years.
Thank you, Randy.
As many as 4 years, right?
I'm sorry, I missed that.
We have as many as 4 years.
This grant has a 3-year deadline without requesting any extensions, so we'd be good through the end of 2023 if successful.
Are there any other questions from the board? Are there any from the public? Not seeing any. That being said, do I hear a motion to move forward to proceed with the DCED grant request as described?
So moved.
We have a motion on the floor from Commissioner Kelly. Do I hear a second?
Second.
I'll make a second. Second from Commissioner Morgan. Can I have a roll call vote, please, Renee?
Commissioner Mobilio.
Aye.
Commissioner Kelly.
I'm going to vote the same way that I did on April 1st with our last grant, that yes, I think it makes sense to certainly submit the paperwork, but given the economic climate that we're in with the uncertainty, that I would ask that this would come before the board before any other township monies are spent moving forward if it is awarded.
Commissioner Seton.
Aye.
Commissioner Morgan.
Aye. Motion carried. Thank you, Randy and Mike.
Thank you.
All right. Next this evening, under motions, we have 4 motions for consideration and possible action this evening. The first is a motion on Norfolk Southern Agreement regarding 4741 Chapman's Road. Attorney Pereira is with us this evening. Welcome, Lisa.
Thank you very much. Thank you. Before the board this evening is a reimbursement agreement that we are requesting be executed by the developer as part of their warehouse project at 4741 Chapman's Road. That project was approved by the board last year, and as part of the proposal, there will be 2 underground water and sewer pipes that have to cross the Norfolk Southern Railway right-of-way. The Norfolk Southern company has provided to us a license agreement that the township has to execute, which essentially lays out our ability to maintain and repair and do whatever we need to do to the water and sewer lines that ultimately will be maintained by the township. This reimbursement agreement with the developer basically sets out the requirement that the developer be solely responsible for the installation of the facilities that are being proposed, as well as being fully responsible for the payment of all fees to Norfolk Southern, which in this case is a total of $5,000. The developer has agreed to enter into this agreement. In fact, they have already signed it and delivered it to the township. We have not yet received the $5,000 fee, but it's my understanding that was mailed out last week. If the board is so inclined to enter into this reimbursement agreement this evening, we would still need to prepare a resolution authorizing the execution of the license agreement. It's part of the requirements in the actual license agreement itself. So the first step would be to vote on whether or not to enter into the reimbursement agreement.
Thank you, Attorney Pereira. Are there any questions or comments regarding this particular motion from the board?
I have a question regarding the water and sewer lines. I believe that Attorney mentioned that they'll be maintained by the township. Is that typical that a township would be maintaining, since the warehouse is running these lines themselves? It's typical.
Yep, it's typical that gets turned over to the township. At the end of the day, it's our system, so you know, in a system like this, we want to be obviously responsible for it. We can make sure we make the necessary repairs as they do come up.
That makes sense. Thank you.
Sure.
Any other questions from the board? Any questions from the public? All right, that being said, I do have a motion for consideration this evening. Do I hear a motion to move forward? The Norfolk Southern Agreement regarding 4741 Chapman's Road.
So moved.
We have a motion on the floor from Commissioner Kelly. Do I hear a second?
Second.
Second from Commissioner Mobilio. All in favor? Well, we'll take a roll call vote. I apologize. I think we're all sitting together.
Commissioner Mobilio.
Aye.
Commissioner Kelly.
Aye.
Commissioner Seton.
Aye.
Commissioner Morgan.
Aye. Motion carries.
Aye.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you, Attorney Pereira.
Thank you.
Next this evening for consideration is the motion, Norfolk Southern Agreement regarding Crackersport DC Warehouse. George or Attorney Bader, would you like to present on this one?
I'd be glad to. This is not dissimilar from the one presented by Attorney Pereira a moment ago. This is the warehouse development that's been approved at the intersection of Crackersport Road and Eck Road. And as you're heading north on Eck from Crackersport, there is a railroad crossing owned by Norfolk Southern. And as part of the project, that intersecting point of Eck Road and the railroad will be improved. And I believe it was the township that requested that improvement as part of the project. And Norfolk Southern does not enter into agreements of this type with private developers. They insist the municipality enters into it. That's the reason for the last agreement. That's the reason for this agreement. But because the agreement between the township and Norfolk has to be entered into, we want to make sure the developer has all responsibility. So this indemnification and reimbursement agreement is to assure that. There'll be an escrow posted at $20,000. Estimate for the work by Norfolk is between $15,000 and $16,000. The responsibility will rest with the developer to get that taken care of. And in addition to indemnifying the township with respect to those costs imposed by Norfolk Southern, there's of course an indemnification with respect to actual project work itself. So that's it in a nutshell. If the board has any questions, I'll be glad to field them as best I can. I believe Mr. Marles is still here. If anybody has any questions for him, he's representative of the developer. And Blake, is there anything you wanted to add to my summary?
No, that's accurate, Joe. This is the section of Eck Road that the developer agreed to straighten and widen. And in order to do that, there's this very small strip along the Norfolk Southern right-of-way which had to be expanded. So basically what we're talking about is a 10-foot widening of right-of-way in order to straighten that road. The agreement was not a condition of approval. There were two conditions of approval. One was that the developer grant the additional right-of-way through the Norfolk Southern corridor, and that was done. And the second one was that the applicant agreed to pursue with Norfolk Southern frontage improvements, but it specifically says that doing that work was not even a condition of approval. This is something that the developer is doing voluntarily. And this agreement does nothing more than assure that the township has no cost or exposure associated with it.
I concur with that summary. Any questions from the board?
I don't hear any. Attorney Zader, thank you both. Are there any questions from the public? Not seeing any. Do I hear a motion to move forward regarding the agreement with Norfolk Southern and Cracker Sports DC Warehouse? We have a motion on the floor from Commissioner Kelly. Do I hear a second?
Second.
Second from Commissioner Mobilio. Can I have a roll call vote, please, Renee?
Commissioner Mobilio.
Aye.
Commissioner Kelly.
Aye.
Commissioner Seton.
Aye.
Commissioner Morgan.
Aye. Motion carries. Thank you. Next this
Thank
evening
you.
under motions, we have a motion to proceed with the purchase of a leaf vacuum machine from Upper Macungie Township. Randy.
Good evening, everybody. I may ask Herb to jump in here at one point too, but for the most part, we became aware of an opportunity at a neighboring township. They were getting rid of some equipment. One was a leaf vacuum, which we were actually in the market for in this year's budget. We did budget $120,000 in our state highway aid fund to purchase a new leaf machine. Typically a new leaf machine without attachments, bells and whistles, you're talking 90 to 110,000. So we left a little bit extra in the budget there just in case. This is a machine that we really only use 3 months out of the year, so it's a little tough to justify spending that amount of money. But when we became aware of this opportunity with Upper Macungie, we had our mechanics go over to take a look at this leaf vac to inspect it. Really, it turned right over. It's got relatively low hours for a machine like this. It's got just under 6,000 hours. We did make a preliminary offer. Of course, the board would need to approve this for $8,750. So this would be saving a lot of money for the township in our state highway aid budget, which Steve and Herb and I have been talking about potentially maybe shuffling some things around to help pay for some road paving this year. So without getting too much into those details, tonight's motion, what we're looking for is a recommendation from the Board of Commissioners to be able to bring this to the Upper Macungie Township Board for approval of our offer of $8,750 for this new, or I should say used, leaf machine.
Randy, far be it from me to be, I'm certainly not an expert on most anything, to be honest. It just seems like such a good deal. We do have an idea, like, does this thing actually run? Does it have an engine? Are there raccoons living in it? I mean, it's like so cheap.
Yeah,
if I can answer that for you, Matt. I went over there with our two mechanics. It fired right up. It does have 8,500 and some hours on it, which
no,
is
6,000, Herb, just under 6,000 hours.
And it is in very great shape. I mean, there's hardly any rust on it. The lift works. It's very new, the lift on it. They take very good care of their leaf machines and all their equipment over there. They're garage kept and everything. Our mechanics are thinking it's a no-brainer to buy this than to buy a new one.
Yeah, and it turned right over when we started. So.
I would find it hard to believe that with the relationship we have with Upper Macungie, that we would get a lemon. I think this sounds like a great deal. I think you hit the jackpot on this one.
When we went over there, they showed us the service records and that of everything that they use for it. The reason they're taking it out of their fleet is they are buying a truck mounted one that they just drive through the township. The reason we want to go to the trailer pulled one more than the suction machine that we have to put a box in the truck is if we have water breaks or if we have a snowstorm that pops up, we have to dismantle the whole truck to get it ready for snow. We go this route, we just take it off the hitch, put the spreader plate on, and we're ready to throw salt or to be dug on.
This would give us the feasibility to have more leaf pickup options longer instead of because of the snow, because of switching over.
Yes, and this, you'll actually be able to keep this truck out longer picking up than the box that we put on the single axle. That is only about 8 cubic yards we can haul. This one can haul up to 20 cubic yards at one time.
So we're actually getting more efficient. We've got a second leaf crew out there now, or this fall we would if we were able to purchase this. And, you know, we should be able to get through the township a lot faster with leaf collection.
Randy, my only question, Randy, is whether you shaved your own head or did you sneak out to get a haircut from someone?
That was my wife and I. Yeah, we got a little brave with the clippers, we should say, but it hasn't been this short in a long time.
Did you have a Flowbee sitting around from the 80s in the garage?
Yeah.
I got to check it out.
I think I'll see a couple more shaved heads here at the next meeting, though. I think all the guys' hairs are starting to get long. Nobody's been brave yet, though.
I have a question on this trailer.
Are there any other questions? Commissioner Kelly, did you have another question?
Yes, my first question actually. How old is this machine? Not hours, but actually years.
Do you remember the year?
I don't remember the year. I can't give you that year. I could call and get that year. I do not know offhand what that machine is.
Not on the pictures, is it? Steve, if you scroll down a little bit.
No, it's not on the pictures, Randy.
No. Okay.
You know, on the one hand,
you said you had. You said you had
great shape.
Our team checked it out. Had maintenance.
Yes. Yep. Our mechanics looked at it.
Yep. It does have a brand new propeller put in it, which actually does do the mulching, which is one of the most expensive repair parts on these machines.
So if we approve this, then the remaining amount of money in the state highway fund will remain there as unallocated?
Yeah, we could, potentially shuffle some things around. Steve might be able to jump in on this a little bit, but we could potentially shuffle some things around. We could go back to PennDOT with a revised project scope if we wanted to use leftover monies for paving or something, Diane. That's something we could work with our rep. His name's Jeff Rohrbach. We could send a proposal to him for approval. It's paving, so state highway aid, liquid fuels funds, that's typically what it's used for.
Are there any other questions from the board on this particular request for a purchase? Are there any questions from the public on this request for purchase?
Tori, there was one comment on the chat from Lee Salt. If you had to rebuild the major components, what would the cost be?
Leaf machines, honestly, a lot of leaf need
battery.
Yeah, it depends.
Is it fair to say, Randy, that even if you had to replace all the major parts of the machine, it was less than buying a brand new?
Yeah.
If I would have to put a number out there, if you had to rebuild this to get it operational, I would say it'd be around 15 to 17,000 in parts.
But we have a similar one now that our guys are confident working on. Even if we get 4 or 5 years out of this thing, I think we're doing pretty well.
Did we not buy a leaf collector last year?
Street sweeper. Yeah.
For nothing for leaf.
No, we didn't get any leaf back systems last year.
I think considering that is a huge service to our community that our residents have very high expectations for, if this can enhance the service that we were already giving and is a good product, I support it for sure.
Motion to approve.
All right. So we do have a motion on the floor from Commissioner Kelly. Do I hear a second?
Second.
Second from Commissioner Mobilio, I think that was. Can I have a roll call vote, please?
Commissioner Mobilio.
Aye.
Commissioner Kelly.
Aye.
Commissioner Seton.
Aye.
Commissioner Morgan.
Aye. Motion carries. Fantastic. Thank you.
Thank you, everyone.
All right.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, Herb. Thanks, Randy. Next this evening for consideration, we have a motion to proceed with payment through March 31st for the fire department's incentive program. I will note that we did talk about this particular subject matter, which Commissioner Kitsarabbit will talk about here, but we talked about it in our volunteer fire subcommittee as well. I will say that the volunteer fire subcommittee did recommend approval of this process, but I'll let Chris take the floor and give a further explanation. Chris, welcome.
Okay,
Chris,
thank you.
One day, joke will get old, I promise you. One day, I can't tell you when. It'll get old eventually, I promise.
Oh, that's okay. All right. So we had the subcommittee, the volunteer subcommittee meeting on April 6th. At that meeting, it was discussed about the possibility of doing quarterly payments. So we did come up with the numbers. I did email that out to the board earlier today. The first payout for the first quarter with a total of 2,822 responses total, it comes to a total bill of $21,165. And that would be getting payments out to Citronia, Greener Walls, Triclover, and Woodlawn. I could go, if you like, I could go over each individual one also on that.
I think what's important is that we tell everybody that this payment normally was put out annually, and they had requested it be done quarterly to better benefit the membership.
Yes, normally it was put out at the end of the year, so it was a once made payment. Now they're requesting that rather than paying a one-time payment, that we would be able to pay them on a quarterly basis. And get that incentive program out put out quarterly.
All right. Are there any questions or comments for Chris on this particular motion? Like I said, this did go through Volunteer Fire Subcommittee. Commissioner Sutton was on that call, as well as myself and the other members of the committee, and we further supported this particular process. Are there any questions from the public? None being said, do I hear a motion to move forward?
I'll make a motion.
We have a motion on the floor from Commissioner Kelly. I think we had a second from Commissioner Stetton. Can I have a roll call vote, please, Renee?
Commissioner Mobilio.
Aye.
Commissioner Kelly.
Aye.
Commissioner Stetton.
Aye.
Commissioner Morgan.
Aye. Motion carries. All right. Thank you. Next this evening, we have nothing under correspondence and information items. Unless, Renee, you had anything you wanted to share?
No, I again want to thank the community as we continue to go through these unprecedented times. We've had to make some park closures and some disc golf course closures and basketball courts, which we know people want to be outside, but you know, in accordance with the governor's orders and guidelines, the social distancing is important. So hopefully in the next few weeks we can start to come out of these challenging times and hopefully get back to a little bit of maybe a new normal now. So
thank you, Renee. Yes, I believe I think the community and the township as a whole has been doing a phenomenal job at being just being adapting to this pandemic. Every day is changing. Our responsibilities as community members and as a service organization are always changing as well. So thank you everybody for helping to stop the spread of the virus, and also we always wish you well. So thank you, Renee.
And Tori, just to echo what Commissioner Morgan just said. Some people on the phone don't know what all goes on behind the scenes, but this staff, this administration for the township work tirelessly. They're constantly on top of everything, and that includes not only Renee and Randy and Steve and all the people that are on this line, but also Jeff Kelly, who is in charge of our emergency management team. For the public that's on this line, you guys are in incredibly great hands. And just know that everyone on this call, everyone on this line, everyone in the township is working tirelessly to make sure everything is running smoothly and everyone's taken care of.
Thanks, Matt.
Thanks, Matt. All right. We have nothing this evening under direction and discussion items. We do have a few old business items. They include Where's Sam, the campus renovation project, the township digital platforms and credit cards. Yes, Commissioner Kelly.
I'm sorry, under direction and discussion, I did have something I wanted to talk about.
Certainly, what is it?
I wanted to share with the board and the public that Commissioner Michael Wolf, who's not here tonight, and we're on the Finance Committee, and we did meet last week to review the budget. Obviously, we're looking a little more critically than we would have given the COVID issue that's before us. To look at our budget, it was crafted last year with projected revenues. And obviously, given the climate that we're in, the projections are a little bit obsolete due to our business shutdown and revenue, earned income taxes coming in. And both Commissioner Wilk and I were in agreement that it's important to take steps proactively to safeguard township finances in light of the pandemic, that it's time to limit expenditures, to consider protecting our taxpayers, our tax base, to limit expenditures to only essential expenses at this point, again, to protect the finances and ensure that we will live within our budget. Not knowing our revenue makes it very difficult to plan and move forward. And I know that Commissioner Wilk could not be here tonight due to a death in his family, but he did send me an email while we were on this call stating this, mirroring the same that I just said. And it is the recommendation that we would like to make a motion to ask the board to place a temporary hold on non-essential spending until the state lifts the shutdown, and that the Finance Committee can then assess our financial health as we move forward.
I absolutely appreciate that. I think that that's a given, that non-essential spending has already been, I mean, we don't make a habit of having non-essential spending. I don't know what you mean by that, Diane.
Well, for example, things that don't have to do with the day-to-day operation of the basic coverage of the government of South Whitehall. So if there's things that we can put aside and put on hold until our financial situation is more clear. If we're looking at a potential shortfall in our revenue, which was what we discussed last week in our meeting, it's certainly something that we don't want to spend money that we may not have moving forward. And the other issue that was brought up. Oh, go ahead.
Sorry. No, I would imagine that that's the approach of the township always. I mean, certainly even more so now. I don't know. I mean, if the motion is just to make a statement to the public that that's the case, that's one thing. But I think it should be clear that, non-essential spending is, we think of that every day, especially now during this pandemic. I don't want to give the impression that we're not already doing that.
Can I jump in here with just, yeah, I guess I don't know. I mean, obviously we need to continue to pay the things, our computer support and licenses and those types of things we have as a department, and we look on a weekly basis as the people who lead the township from an operational perspective. We're monitoring our expenses and holding capital expenses that are not critical or that had already not been allocated prior to the pandemic. So I guess, I think we're fiscal stewards on a daily basis of the tax money of the residents. But again, in terms of non-essential spending, I don't think we ever spend non-essentially. We would spend to keep the operations of the township moving. So I guess, I don't know, defining a non-essential expense, I'm not quite sure how to define that.
Well, I guess, we didn't just come together with any particular things, but I can tell you that I did have a resident reach out to me who lives in Springhouse Farms this week and said that their street was swept 3 times in the last 2 weeks. If there's a way that we can cut back on doing so much of that, just those plantings and parks, I don't know. I know things might have been already allocated, but we allocated based on revenue that we may not see. We're talking about potentially some great numbers of potential cuts in revenue. So instead of worrying about this down the road, it was Commissioner Wilk and my recommendation to take a look at it now instead of waiting until afterwards to plan ahead, to not spend money that we don't necessarily have. The budget, as we know it today, can't stand on its own because the revenues that we projected most likely will not be the numbers that we had hoped for. So in order to not end up in a deficit and have a tax increase at the end of the year due to this, we were asking and recommending that we take a look at things and potentially even scale back as people aren't driving as much. You know, the business of the township, our businesses are closed, or people aren't going many places. You know, to look at Parks and Rec, I know there's some events already scheduled early in May that I think we need to talk about as well. Doesn't look like this stay-at-home order is going to be lifted if the numbers are continuing to climb as they are again today with the COVID numbers.
Can I just chime in for a second? I mean, I think generally I agree with Commissioner Kelly as far as non-essential spending. I think it right now it's hard to tell what that means because we haven't discussed what is essential, what's not essential. I mean, you know, I know we talked previously, or at least last meeting, about the potential. I should say I brought up the potential for a EIP, earned income tax holiday, talking about potentially paying taxes just to, you know, help residents out. I think generally I agree with the idea of how do we look at the budget, how do we look at our expenses, our expenditures to help individuals who are not necessarily using the township resources right now because of stay-at-home orders and things like that. I support the idea in general. I guess at this point I couldn't vote for something I don't have a, you know, parameters for or scope of, but I think the idea is right. And I agree with the idea, and the extent that we can figure out how to reallocate things. You know, the problem, I guess, is that we don't know how long this is going to last. You know, I mean, we have a president sitting there saying we want to open everything up by May, and we have a governor who's saying, you know, we can't do that by May 1st, and there's just so much uncertainty right now. I think it's a good idea in general. I just don't know how we put up that into action.
Yeah, this is Steve Card. We spoke during the Finance Committee about things that we can stop currently right now. Like example would be, we already approved the bathroom in Cover Bridge Park. We're sitting tight on that because we don't know if that's something we're going to have to stop and delay for another year or whatever. So we've stopped non-essential spending already. And the Finance Committee talked about we're going to keep meeting. We have another meeting next week already scheduled, and as we start to kind of see the picture as this comes in over the next month or so, we'll have a better idea of how bad potentially it could be. Right now, it's you can point either which way, and you may be right. You can guess it's a complete red-black crapshoot right now. So we have already stopped a lot of that spending. I don't know what we can't do that we haven't already done outside of decisions that I don't think are accurate to be made yet. 4 weeks into this, completely unknown. So we're going to keep monitoring it. We do it every day as staff, and we will keep doing it. We'll work with Diane and Michael on the Finance Committee to come up with the best plan, and it always involves the best financial situation for our residents. So I mean, that's one of the things we always talk about. So we're going to keep working that way. And go ahead, Diane.
That was actually me.
Oh, sorry, Chris.
That's okay. Go ahead.
I think it's important, and Steve, that's really what I was getting at. I appreciate your comment, Diane, and the gesture, but I firmly believe that staff is constantly, looking at non-essential spending, and especially during these troubled times. That's not going to change. But to make a broad sweep motion without a clear understanding what isn't essential, because that's changing every single day, could be a bit troublesome. So, in my opinion, I think I value the fact that you and Mike are actively involved with the Finance Committee. I think we need to make sure that we continue to meet as a committee, all of you, and feed back to the full board the conversation, so that the full board is in full understanding of what's going on. But I do believe that staff has a good hold on what at this point is essential and non-essential, and we should make sure and entrust a lot of that with them and have them feedback to us as well.
Thank you for your comments. I wanted to just also get back to Commissioner Mobilio when we're talking about financials. I know the 4 new commissioners we've been on board now, this is our 4th month. I personally have not seen our month, our year-to-date financial health or monthly. So I guess I would ask now if we've got a year-end 2019 financials that can be shared with the board, and do we have, I know you're working on February, but do we have January 15th financials to share with the board as a whole? Because at the end of the day, as commissioners, we are responsible for ultimately, the taxes and the oversight of financial.
Yep, I will send the December ones out tomorrow. I do have January's also. I can send out in the morning when I get in.
Do you have a year-end
Thursday
2019 as well?
Yeah, that's what
sorry.
I said. That was the first comment. Maybe I broke up. Yeah, I'll send December's out tomorrow morning, and then I'll send January's that I have, and the February and March will be done by Monday, like we promised.
Right. Okay. And when you say December, you mean, I was asking for the year end. Do you have a picture of the full year, or is that just all encapsulated?
It's all encapsulated. The financials will include the month compared to month to date compared for the year also. So we'll have December, in a December financial, you would have the month over month, and you would have the full year.
Thank you. I know it's very important for us to be kept abreast of that, but especially now more than ever due to the COVID and our economics right now, that we as a board be kept updated as often as possible.
Yep.
And Commissioner Kelly, just to kind of parlay off of what you propose as far as your motion is concerned, I would certainly support a motion that just said, that we encourage the staff of South Whitehall Township to continue to look at areas in which we can reduce expenses and reduce overhead in light of the current pandemic. I mean, I just don't want to pigeonhole everyone into a non-essential definition without a essential definition.
You're breaking up a little bit. It's hard for me to hear you, but I think I'm in agreement with what you said.
Okay. I was just saying that I would certainly agree to a motion to direct the staff of South Whitehall Township to continue to look at areas where we can reduce expenses, overhead expenditures in light of the current pandemic. I just don't want to offer up a non-essential definition without knowing, what's kind of underneath that umbrella.
Correct. I mean, I think we need to make a distinction between something that's already budgeted and allocated, because those were done on numbers that may or may not ring true. And again, I'm going to state pretty strongly, I don't want to see us end up in the red because we've spent based on numbers that we can't verify today because our revenues, the projections are not valid. So if you need me to restate a motion, then I would make a motion in conjunction with Commissioner Mobilio to have our staff keep a critical eye on spending and continue to look at essentials and save where we can so that we can have good financial health for the township moving forward in light of the COVID shutdown.
And I would second that motion.
We have a motion on the floor from Commissioner Kelly. We have a second from Commissioner Mobilio. Can I have a roll call vote, please?
Commissioner Mobilio.
Aye.
Commissioner Kelly.
Aye.
Commissioner Sutton.
Hi, but may I add something? Maybe you can save a little bit on buying toilet paper.
There's a shortage, Joe, we gotta pay a premium. What don't you understand about that?
Can't find it anyway.
We gotta compete with New York City, with Governor Cuomo for all that toilet paper.
Joe, we shut down an entire township building. We're not buying any toilet paper. It's part of the lease. So I tried.
It's BYOTP.
Okay,
Commissioner.
Renee,
Yeah.
you wanna? I vote aye too. With
The
the
answer is
comment,
yeah, Maya.
with the comment, my yes is with the comment that I'd like to just state the fact that this is something that I believe through all the years I've been working with the township, the staff is already doing. This just kind of validates that in a motion. And I thank you for continuing to be diligent on reviewing that information in light of this situation. So, all right, motion carries. Under the old business, we had 4 items. I don't believe we've had any movement on these in light of the other actions that have been happening with COVID. Renee, I'll let you. That's Where's Dam, the campus renovation, township digital platforms, and credit cards. Did you want to touch on any of those? Do we have any updates?
No, Where's Dam still in permitting process. Campus renovation project is again kind of a moving target at this point, and we're working with them to determine some additional continuing to move on the project. So I don't have any different answers. Again, we discussed the township, trying to monitor our expenses. Website's one of those things that we're monitoring. And we have received some proposals, but again, if we're looking to cut some of those non-essential expenses, that might be one. And then credit cards are still due with a date of June 30th.
I have a question on the credit cards. I was looking on our website. Somebody was asking me about the form to get a toter, and I saw there was a link for paying by credit card on our website for a fee of $2.95. Is that active? And
That is.
something that
I got it.
I was going to say, I just want to go back to that. That's official payments, and that was instituted years ago, and that's refuse only, and that can still be, refuse can still utilize that when there was a board of authority that they did not want to accept credit cards for those things. So that refuse was put into official payments years ago, and the authority had chosen to do that.
And does that show up on our refuse bills that people have an option to pay online on our website by credit card?
You'll have to take that side of it.
I can't remember what a bill looks like right now. I believe it does, but I'm not 100% positive of that.
Yeah, the reason I'm asking is, again, I've had a lot of complaints from residents who want to be able to pay by credit card, and if there's a way to do that on our website, I would ask that we add that verbiage to the bill so that if that's something that a resident would like to take advantage of, that is something available through the township, especially now that the township building is closed and they can't get out. If we can make it easier for people to pay their bills online, I certainly would endorse that.
Yeah, and it's only refuse, so it's only set up and authorized for that. So, but yeah, that's been out there for a long time, and it really doesn't get that much use. So I will make sure it's on the bills if it isn't already. If we have the space, I have to double check all the verbiage space on there. There's some limits to that, but we'll look into it, Dan.
Okay, great, thank you.
One thing just to throw out there, because I heard Renee was talking about the website, and that might not be essential. And I mean, I agree with you generally, but I think, we've all done, or I should say you guys have done a ton of work moving this website acquisition forward and getting that project, kind of at the forefront. And I'd hate to see that. And I'm not saying obviously that project does not go to COVID. It does not go to necessarily health and safety of the township, but at the same time, it's something that I feel like the residents have been clamoring for as far as access to these public meetings. I mean, obviously right now we can all access it the way we're doing it, but when we get back into in-person meetings, in a month or two, wherever it's going to be, which will take that long to get the website up and running. I think it's going to be actually, if you think about it, potentially beneficial for the health and safety, because now it allows people to stay at home to keep that risk away from having to show up to meetings where there's still that opportunity to get ill or especially because a lot of our participants are elderly or in that potential risk group. So I would not be in favor of sidelining the website project as a way of saving money. That's just my personal opinion.
I agree with you, Commissioner Mobilio, and I know I've had a conversation with Renee about this as well. And you had mentioned something about waiting until next year. I don't agree that we should wait that long. I feel like it's something that we may not need to revamp the entire thing, but we can certainly talk about improvements that can be made to bring as much information to our community as we possibly can through our website, Facebook, and Nextdoor. All right. I think that there's, certainly more discussion to be had on the website. It's been a topic for quite some time. I don't think anybody disagrees that it's a point for us that needs some improvement. Renee, I believe that you're already working on some of the different aspects of the website and opportunities for more social outreaches. So maybe what we could do is have this as either a workshop or another discussion to see where we stand today and how we can move forward with it and what our potential costs would be.
We have another meeting next week with some other potential vendors. So after that, we will have multiple different proposals and different opportunities.
Okay, and then maybe at that point, Renee, it would be a good chance to feedback to the board on what our opportunities are, what a timeline could be, since this is something important for communications for the township, and see where we can go from there. And just as a follow-up, go ahead. I was going to say, as a follow-up to the topic that I brought up last week about open space and fees in lieu, do we have an update for that? And are we going to schedule a workshop? I would prefer that we do this sooner than later, before we get too far down the road with more developments that would possibly be influenced by this. I'm not sure we've got more information on it yet, Diane. And having additional meetings has been a bit difficult over the pandemic. Not saying that we can't have one on this, but Renee, I'll defer to you on timing for gathering that information on the open space fees and further discussion on that. You and George, if you have.
I will.
So Diane, to answer your question, I don't think we have anything tonight, but maybe we can get some information together and feedback on a good time to talk about it here in the very near future. All right, well, maybe we can put it on the first meeting in May agenda then and get some
probably
data.
The board meeting at this point, so we can
I'm
put
sorry,
it on.
I didn't hear you.
We could put it on the first agenda in May. It's probably better, easier to do it at a regular board meeting at this point.
Yeah, that's perfect. That'd be great. All right, thank you. So this is the opportunity now, for courtesy of the floor, for anybody in the audience to talk about any non-agenda item. I do know we have Brian Height. You had a question. I can read your question, or you can unmute yourself and feel free to ask your question yourself. Brian?
Yes. I know that the yard waste drop-off is not open right now. The last 2 weeks, the advanced disposal hasn't picked up my yard waste. I called them today and the guy was kind of like, well, I don't know if we're doing that. And I'm like, well, if you don't know if you're doing that, then I don't know. Yeah. So that's why I was going to ask you.
Brian, not to our knowledge, they're supposed to be picking up the yard waste at everybody's residences. Steve, I don't know if you know anything differently.
Yeah, I do not. I know I talk to them a couple times a week. They should be picking up the up to 2 35-gallon, 50 pounds or less cans of yard waste, and then the one grass. And if you have any grass stickers, also more than that. So Brian, I'll reach out to them in the morning and see why it didn't get picked, why there was either cans or stuff.
Yeah, they picked up everything else. So.
Okay.
Yeah,
So
I also had a complaint.
I don't live near people. I don't know. Thank you.
Okay, let me check on it. My only feeling is like they just started doing that and those are new crews coming through. So maybe there's a hiccup in their route. And I can, if you guys let me know this, like if you guys call in or if somebody has that type of situation, feel free to call them. Also, you can call the township and we'll try to make sure that those hiccups are taken care of.
Okay.
I'll make one additional kind of comment on the whole trash, refuse, recycling. We do talk to them advanced on, we talk to them on a daily basis, but I talk to them probably about 2 times a week and they're still fully staffed. We kind of talked about potential plans, like if this thing gets worse and they start to lose staff. The one thing that's beneficial is from moving to the automated pickup. The guys don't have to touch the recycling, and the trash guys don't have to touch the cans. So that's probably keeping them more safe. Hopefully we can continue to do that. They keep their yard and garden guys, yard waste guys safe. But hopefully we don't have to, hopefully we're getting more service and better service than a lot of other communities, because we've actually heard from other communities where they don't have the automated services and they've had to cut guys back. And that means either cutting some type of service, either bulk items or yard waste items or recycling, and kind of working through that process. So luckily, knock on wood, we're good to go right now. That is not the case in some other communities across the country. So hopefully we can just kind of keep it as is and get as much services as we can right now through this pandemic.
How is the flow of complaints? I know like initially it was, a deluge. Has it slowed down? I mean, has that worked out at all?
No, there's still, since we've had to close the yard waste center, the yard and garden center, there's been a lot more of that at the curb. So they're being very strict on how much they're picking up. They'll pick up the 2 cans of the yard waste. They'll pick up your grass can. If you have any stickers for grass, they'll pick that up. They can't take other stuff, or there's the potential that they won't even get through their entire route. So people would, like, sections would not even be finished. That's a very manual process because they're loading those by hand. So we do need to stick to, and they're going to stick to those maximums that are contracted. We've seen a lot more cardboard. Obviously, people are getting even more deliveries to home now. Well, baby beer, there's a lot more recycling. So if you throw recycling out like next to your toter, that might not get picked up because that stuff is supposed to be in a toter. So either people are going to have to kind of hoard their cardboard for a little bit until we get out of this.
We had a ton of complaints, at least initially, obviously when the new
complaints. Sorry about that.
Yeah, I mean, the new hauler first starting getting acclimated, it was like, oh, no one came to pick up my stuff for a week or 2 weeks. I mean, have the general complaints about route mapping tended to slow down, or?
I think that is slowed down. It got offset with calls for us for the replacement toters. The replacement toter program is in effect now, and we mailed that out. We mailed a notice of that out with the April bills. So people are starting to take advantage of that program. So now we've got stacks of toters being delivered, or stacks of toters to process. So it takes us a couple days to get them through to people that are at home to get those processed. But I think most of the calls have been on that or the Yard and Garden Center. And that's just an unfortunate thing with COVID, is having people go to one location is difficult and it's not safe. So we get a lot of phone calls based on when is the Yard and Garden Center opening. And right now, we don't know.
So thank you, Steve. We do have another question or comment from Mr. Burke. Mr. Burke?
Yes, thank you. At the beginning of the meeting, there was a little bit of discussion on the permanent record of these meetings. And I think Mr. Mobilio, I believe it was, said we agreed to keep more substantial meeting notes or keep the recordings. I just have an observation. I missed the April 1st meeting. So today I went back and I reviewed the recording of that April 1st meeting, and it was very clear. It was easy to understand, and I think it provides an excellent, permanent, and accurate record of what transpired at a meeting. After all, nothing could be more complete and accurate than the spoken word. So I would certainly vote that we use those recordings as a permanent record of meetings, or whatever electronic meetings might be in our future. Maybe it's video and audio, or whatever it may be. I think it's a lot more accurate than trying to transcribe the meeting in the old-fashioned way. Just a comment and an observation, but again, it was very clear and easy to understand.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Are there any other questions or comments or courtesy of the floor this evening from anybody in the audience?
Tori, there was one from at 8:51 from Mr. Hodges. I'll read it off, and if he's here, he can gladly chime in. So, courtesy of the floor, thank you to the Commissioners Mobilio and Kelly for suggesting the land fee split between the two townships. This makes the most sense. Such a small amount of money on a property with shared townships. And I also feel that going forward, the township, just as all of us with our own households, need not spend on non-budgeted, non-necessary items, especially those that will be paid in subsequent years. Way too much risk in uncertain times. We will be feeling this economic crunch for a long time. Thank you.
Yeah, I did respond to that one as well.
Okay.
Anything else from anybody from the public? All right. Our invoices and purchasing requisitions have been reviewed by the Township Manager and the Director of Finance. We do need a motion this evening to pay our bills as tabulated. Do I hear said motion?
So moved.
A motion on the floor from Commissioner Kelly. Do I hear a second?
Second.
Second from Commissioner Mobilio. Can I have a roll call vote, please, Renee?
Commissioner Mobilio,
Aye.
Commissioner Kelly,
Aye.
Commissioner Seton,
Aye.
Commissioner Morgan.
Aye. Motion carries. Thank you. We have no executive session planned for this evening. Again, I wish everyone on this call and all your loved ones, family, and friends good health, and we look forward to getting back in person with everybody in the very near future. So with that being said, I do need a motion for adjournment.
So moved.
A motion on the floor from Commissioner Kelly. Do I hear a second?
Second.
Second from Commissioner Seton. We're just going to do an all in favor. Aye.
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 Need two more ayes.
Aye.
Seton? All
I think you got them all.
I think we got them. All right. Meeting has been adjourned. Have a good evening, everybody. Thank you, Steve and Renee and all of staff for putting this together. Much appreciated.
Good night, everyone.
Everybody, take care.